Hey guys, what's going on? Welcome back to the Kern Creation Shop. So today we're going to be making a little wooden motor. It's going to be basically a Harley Davidson twin cam modeled down and made out of wood, a little bit of metal, and even some leather. So starting off, we're going to take some rustic cherry slabs and we're going to make those rocker covers. Basically what we're going to do is take the actual photograph of the engine and transfer everything over, then go through and cut it all out on the scroll saw and then sand it all into shape so that we have it with the proper shape and sizes and proportions and everything. Now we're moving on to the bottom end. The one thing that I did with the top end that I wish I could have done with the bottom end was I set everything up so that the grain followed from one side to the other. Unfortunately, I just didn't have a wide enough slab to do that and keep the bottom end in there, but we still got the idea across. So now we're going to start working on the air cleaner, and we're making that out of a piece of firewood. Basically, I went over to my father's house, checked out his firewood, and stole a piece of beautifully spalted maple. So now from there, we're going to go through and cut it down to shape. Here, I was thinking about taking it all in that last pass, but I did not feel comfortable with it, and the table saw is not a forgiving tool. So instead of going through and risking my bodily harm, I decided to go back through, take it back to the joiner, and make it so that we could take the other pass on the other side. From there I went on and used some hole saws to cut the grooves, and we're not using the pilot point, so it had to be clamped down, but they're all nice and concentric, and then over to the back to the scroll saw to cut the shape out. From there, it's a lot of filing and Dremel work just to clear out that section in the center there. The spalted maple is a really hard wood, and it's pretty rough to cut, but it does give a really nice finished product when you're done. So the I think it's a woodchuck wood rasp here. Makes real quick work of it and just cuts like butter. So it's a lot easier to get it all shaped down, and then once we get it to the rough shape, we can go through and step it up through the grits of sandpaper and get it looking nice. So now we're going to make the front cover plate and the cylinder jugs. This is a piece of denim pine I actually found attached to an old pallet, and I had to have. The denim pine is a type of wood that is killed by a certain type of beetle, and it gets basically infected with this fungus that turns the wood blue. So I was a real big fan of that look, and I love the idea of naturally occurring strange colors. So that seemed like the perfect piece to use, so we took it over to the wood lathe and turned a little cone there. From there I was able to take it to the bandsaw, resaw it, and get it to the right thickness, and then I took the cutout of the photograph and glued it onto the back of it and then cut out the shape. This isn't the final one that I use. I actually did make another one off camera, but it was done the same way. Over here now we're just taking another piece of that denim pine over to the joiner just to get the rounded over edges out of the way, and then taking another picture of the motor and drawing out the sides of it. So these are going to be the actual cylinder jugs. So what I'm doing here is just cutting the side of the pine and then holding on to the offcuts. The offcuts are actually going to come in very important in just a minute here. So again, I had probably eight printouts of this photograph, and just every piece I'm trying to use a cutout of it to make sure that everything is the right proportion and the right scale. So now that you see here, that offcut is actually put underneath the piece so that I can hold it flat to the bandsaw table and still cut out the shape. So now that we got that done, put a little bit of finish onto the hardwoods, and while that was drying, I could go over and start working on carving out the actual cylinder jug. So it's a lot of Dremel work right here. I've never really done a lot of wood carving, so it was an interesting learning experience for me. I am a fan of it. It's really relaxing, believe it or not, and I had a lot of fun just carving out these different areas and trying to mimic everything over. As you can see here, I pretty much always had those photographs around so that I could make sure to transfer everything properly. So what I did was transferred all the lines from the one photograph onto my piece of wood, and then using some machinist tools, I just kind of transferred them around to the front. Not really sure of any other way to do that, but it worked. So once I had the lines around, I was able to go through with the Dremel and a cutoff wheel and just set the grooves. Once I had the groove set, I could go back through with some reciprocating saw blades by hand and cut them to the proper shape and the proper size. You'll see that I have a yellow blade and a blue blade. The yellow blade is actually a coarse tooth and the blue is a fine tooth, so I kind of jumped back and forth between the two of them to get everything that I needed accomplished. Here you can see the cutoff wheel kind of burned a lot of the wood when it was setting those lines, so the saw blade did a great job of cleaning that all out, setting the thickness of the grooves and just keeping everything exactly how I wanted it to be. So once that was done, we could go over and start clearancing that little area that goes behind the pushrods. Using the Dremel a lot for that, and then once I have the basic shape set, I switched over to some little needle and hobby files just to clean it all out and get it all straight and squared away. Really tedious job, but it's worth it in the end when it follows the lines that you're after. So now that those grooves are all cut, I can go through and use a Minwax poly shades. So the poly shade is something that I like because they call it a stain and sealer in one, but that's not really the case. It's more of a tinted polyurethane, so when I apply it, I can sand it off of the top without having to worry about it soaking into the material below, so I can get a good hard contrast. So now that that's all done, we're going to start working on the actual push rods. I took some measurements directly off of the photograph itself, transferred them over to some brass with a little bit of die chem and my calipers, and got to cutting. So it's some pretty simple turning, nothing really extreme, just getting them to the right shape, the right size and everything. A lot of fun actually. So now that we have the first one done, there's a first look at the finished push rod, and now we got to make another one. So same idea, lay out the die chem, lay out the lines that we have to cut to, and then start turning. So metal lathe was really put to task here. Again, really easy carving, but a lot of fun. So now that we have the 3 of the ends done, it's time to get that last piece. We wanted to keep a little bit of an area where we could actually cut it back. I don't have the thickness to do 2 complete push rods, so I had to kind of fake it by grinding out a little bit in the back and making it so that it all fit. So now I wanted to do the bolts for the rocker covers, but I didn't have any hex bar the right size. So instead of waiting for something to come in on eBay, I decided to use the indexing feature of the lathe, a little kind of end mill type cutter for my Dremel, and just kind of make my own. So in going through and just indexing it, going through with the Dremel and flattening off all the sides, we were able to basically make our own hex bar, and then from there we were able to turn down the ends and cut it off and get our little bolts. Obviously we're not cutting any threads because it's going into a wood and isn't holding anything, so instead they're going to be glued into place. But now that we have them all made, we can start drilling the holes. So just 3 holes per side, and then drop those into place, and then we're going to grab some walnut. I have 2 pieces of walnut here. The front one was actually off of a pallet. The other one is a piece of really nice figured walnut. So the pallet board, I cut out a little piece, and that's going to be the actual blocks that go above the block that the push rods go into. So first things first, I wanted to transfer over the shape that I wanted and cut it out on the scroll saw. Once I had that, I could trace it out onto a piece of paper, cut that out, and transfer it over. With that, I was able to make sure that I had an exact match for the 2 sides, and they were perfectly symmetrical. After that, a little bit of Dremel work and some hand sanding, and we had it to the shape that I wanted. I found a really nice set online that were kind of this almost like a stipped look to it. So Once we had them all cut and shaped, I drilled some holes through them. That's basically going to hold some brass nails that will go where the bolts would on the real engine. So doing the same thing with this cover, attaching it to the back there, just transferring everything over and then drilling it all out and driving those little nails in there. So once that's all together, we can kind of start planning out the frame to go around it. Here we're going to use the rest of that real nice figured walnut. So went through and just squared off one edge there. Could have used the joiner for that, but the table saw just seemed a lot easier in this case. So just cutting a couple of strips there. Those are going to become the molding that's going to go around the frame. And then just getting out the router table and getting it all put together. So I'm starting off with a Roman Ogee bit here. I think that's I've always been a fan of the way that the Roman Ogee looks on the edge of something. It's just a real classic look. On the other side, I wanted to do a round over bit, but I wanted to have a little bit of a shoulder to it. So I just had to kind of switch over the bearings on the router bit itself so it dug a little bit deeper. Once we had that all together, we had both sides done, and it was time to cut the rabbet for the bottom. This is going to be just a slot cutting bit. We're going to cut the rabbet so that the backer will fit there. So now just cutting that little groove there, getting that out of the way, and we can start actually making the shape. Now this is a pretty steep angles that I wanted, so the chop saw wasn't going to do it, so we had to use a table saw. Once I had the one side cut, I was able to transfer the lines over and then start figuring out where everything else was going to fall, and then I could cut the rest of it with the chop saw. So now that I have all four pieces cut, we can measure it all out and lay out the backer piece. I'm just cutting that out of regular Luan. Laid out the diamond, and then unfortunately the camera died, so here I'm just cutting out a smaller piece just so that you can kind of see it going down. From there I took all of that nice figured walnut molding that I had made and just sanded it all down with a 320 grit. I wanted it to really be nice and smooth with a real nice sheen to it so that it really popped when the oil finish went on. So now that everything's all sanded down, just wiping them down and then applying that teak oil. My absolute favorite finish for hardwoods, and man did it wake up the grain in this figured walnut. I'm absolutely astounded by the way that came out. So now that we had the frame done, we had to put something in the frame. So this is a piece of vegetable tanned goat skin, and we're going to go through and just dye it black, and that'll give us a leather backer to go behind the engine and on top of that piece of Luan. So a little bit of a spray adhesive, pushing it down, and then I got a big piece of aluminum stock to basically work as a rolling pin, and then we put down a little bit of sealer on it, and we were good to go on that. Now just doing the final assembly on the motor itself, getting everything together, and it's time to make a backer. So what I'm doing here is taking just a regular washer and putting a pen into the center hole and using the edge of it to roll around. That way I get a space that's a backer that's spaced out. So now just hit that with a coat of polyurethane, and it was time to finish up the frame. I figured I'd do that while the poly was drying, and then while the glue was drying I went through and cut out the backer there. So just 22 gauge sheet metal we're going through. I want it to leave it raw. I want it to rust over time. I'm a really big fan of watching my work change over the years. So I wanted that steel to stay raw so that it would rust and really be a dynamic piece. So after that I needed a spacer to hold that backer piece off of the leather, and I had some of that molding left over, so I figured why not? So we went through and made some of that up and attached to the back. Now I'm just going through, I used a two-part epoxy to hold the engine to the steel backer plate. So a lot of just test fitting it on there, making sure that none of the epoxy leaked out, and then cleaning it up afterwards. And with that we had it all together. So finished wooden motor on top of the leather backer, the steel backer, leather backer, and the figured walnut frame. So here's just a couple of shots of it so you can kind of see the finished piece. It was a really fun experience for me. I haven't done any of this type of work before, so it was a lot of fun and a a lot of challenges that I had to figure out how to overcome. And once it came together, I couldn't be happier with the finished piece. So basically, I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, feel free to drop a like. Let me know what you think about it. Feel free to share it, and hopefully we'll have something new for you soon. Keep an eye out. This is actually a piece of a larger project. This is going to go with that other frame that I made before and the fire hydrant. I can't really say too much more about the finished piece, but it's all going to start making sense pretty soon. So, as always, thanks for checking it out. Hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll talk to you later. Have a good one. Bye.